A young boy trembling in the biting chill parts with his winter coat to cover the costs of his sister's funeral. Just then, a luxurious car glides to a stop nearby, revealing a billionaire within. The man's next move sends the boy into a torrent of tears, his emotions spilling over like a storm unleashed. As we embark on this journey together, we invite you to share your location in the comments below. Your support means the world to us, so don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to fuel our passion for creating more. Now, take a moment to settle in, let the world fade away, and immerse yourself in the unfolding tale. Max clutched the coat around him, yet it offered scant protection against the icy wind that sliced through the flimsy material. His fingers, crimson and rigid from the biting chill, quivered as he clutched the bundle tightly. It was his father's coat, the last remnant that clung to the essence of his presence. Max inhaled deeply, yearning for the elusive aroma of pine and aged leather, yet all that greeted him was the sharp, unforgiving chill of winter's grasp. He gazed intently at the pawnshop's misty window, a world of forgotten treasures obscured behind the glass. Within the dimly lit room, an elderly man draped in a worn cardigan lingered behind the counter, his gaze fixated on a minuscule television, his face a canvas of ennui. With a deep breath, Max steeled himself and swung the door wide, stepping into the unknown. A bell rang out, piercing and resonant, causing him to recoil in surprise. The pawnbroker's gaze darted, a flicker of intrigue igniting as it danced between the coat and Max's expression, then returned once more to the fabric's allure. "What treasures do you hold in your hands, young one?" he inquired, his tone a delicate balance of neutrality, neither harsh nor inviting. "It is my dad's," Max said, his voice barely a whisper. "It is genuine leather. In my contemplation, all I seek is—" His voice trembled, a fragile thread of sound hanging in the air. "I simply require a touch of— for my sister, a beacon of light in my life." The man scowled, adjusting his glasses with a deliberate motion as he grasped the coat and scrutinized it intently. Max shifted uneasily on his feet, his socks now drenched, as the relentless snow poured through the gaping holes in his sneakers. He pressed his fingers together, summoning warmth to return to their chilled surfaces. The silence loomed, shattered only by the haunting hum of the television and the sharp snap of a cash register drawer echoing from the shadows of the back room. With a heavy sigh, the man finally declared, "20 is the best I can do," as he placed the coat upon the counter. "It's ancient, my young friend. The zippers have met their untimely demise. A stain has marred the sleeve as well." Max's heart plunged into the abyss. 20 wouldn't even suffice for a mere bouquet, much less anything beyond that. With a fierce determination, he tightened his grip, the pain in his knuckles a mere whisper against the storm brewing within him. Yet he summoned the strength to nod. "Very well," he murmured, his voice strained. With fingers that felt as if they were made of stone, he grasped the wrinkled bills, forcing himself to avert his gaze from the coat as the man meticulously folded it away, shrouding it in shadows. It was merely a coat, he reassured himself, as if the fabric could hold no deeper significance. It would not summon Lily from the shadows of the past. It would not prevent Mom from weeping herself to slumber each night, haunted by the belief that Max remained oblivious to her sorrow, despite the fragile barriers of their apartment. The bell tolled once more, echoing through the air as Max swung the door wide and ventured into the world beyond. The biting chill struck him with a fierce intensity, its cruel touch penetrating through the inadequate shield of his coat. He tugged at his sleeves, stretching them to their limits, yet the relentless wind slithered in, sending shivers racing through him, his teeth chattering in a desperate symphony. Snowflakes cascaded softly from the overcast heavens, clinging to his hair, dissolving upon his cheeks. The air pierced him, harsh and unforgiving, with every inhalation feeling like a blade carving into his very soul. Max began his journey, boots scraping against the frozen pavement, yet he felt nothing beneath him anymore. He wandered, lost in the shadows of uncertainty, unsure of the path that lay ahead. Perhaps home, a place where the heart yearns to return. Yet home was merely a cage of four walls, a solitary mattress sprawled upon the cold floor, and a mountain of bills that loomed like dark clouds, untouched and unspoken. His mother's eyes, rimmed with crimson and void of life, lingered hauntingly in his thoughts. He clenched his own shut, biting down on his lip until the metallic tang of copper flooded his mouth. A sudden gust of wind swept through, catching him unawares and almost sending him tumbling to the side. Max faltered, his body colliding with the lamppost as his breath escaped in jagged, misty bursts. His hands were as cold as the depths of winter. He pressed them together, though it offered little solace, and continued his journey, head bowed, shoulders curled inwards. The thunderous roar of an engine shattered the stillness, echoing like a distant storm on the horizon. Max's heart raced as he looked up, taken aback by the sudden arrival of a sleek black car that glided to a halt by the curb. Its tinted windows concealed secrets, while the rims sparkled with an allure that cut through the dreary light. The door burst open, revealing a figure of striking stature, tall and imposing, his coat flapping wildly in the chill of the air, defiantly unbuttoned. The man's eyes, keen and scrutinizing, locked onto Max, narrowing ever so slightly. In that fleeting moment, silence enveloped them, a breath held in anticipation. Then, the man's gaze fell upon Max's trembling hands, encased in a thin sweater that clung to his form. Max recoiled, a reflexive step backward, yet the man merely exhaled heavily, his fingers pressing against the bridge of his nose as if burdened by the weight of an unbearable annoyance. In a silent gesture, he cast aside his coat, heavy and shadowy, likely more valuable than all of Max's possessions combined, and gracefully enveloped Max in its warmth. The warmth enveloped Max in an embrace as comforting as a freshly laundered blanket, igniting a sense of solace that surged through him. The lining exuded a silky touch, infused with a whisper of cedar and an air of luxury. Max's knees trembled, and he clutched the front of the coat with fists that felt foreign to him, as if they were not his own. He never intended for tears to spill forth. It unfolded in an instant, the tears streaming fiercely and obscuring my vision, transforming the streetlights into a chaotic blend of yellow and white smudges. His breath clawed at him, and he pressed a sleeve to his face, desperate to quell the torment, but that only intensified the struggle. The man recoiled, his eyes expanding in surprise, utterly unready for such an unexpected response. "Hey," he began, his voice trembling with hesitation. "Behold, my young friend, it is merely a coat. Do not, are you?" Yet the words continued to pour forth, relentless and unyielding. Max stifled a hiccup, his hand pressed firmly against his mouth, his shoulders trembling beneath the weighty fabric. Months of weariness and solitude surged forth in tumultuous, quaking tides, leaving him with nothing but the desperate grip on warmth, praying it would not dissipate into the void. Ethan Hale, the billionaire whose visage graced the glossy covers at the grocery store checkout, whose name danced on the lips of many with a blend of reverence and scorn, found himself standing there, utterly adrift, his eyes flitting about as if anticipating an unexpected flash from a lurking camera. "Hey," Ethan made another attempt, his voice now a gentle whisper. It's all right. Simply inhale deeply, will you?" Yet Max pressed on, unable to relent, for the coat enveloped him in a cocoon of warmth, while the world around him lay frozen in despair. Lily was gone, and no amount of longing could summon her return. His hands clenched the fabric, fingers coiling with intensity. Ethan paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, before he gingerly placed a hand on Max's shoulder, patting it twice as if cradling a delicate treasure. The gesture, awkward and foreign, managed to anchor Max, if only for a fleeting moment. His breath became a gentle whisper, tears transforming into soft, trembling sniffles. "There," Ethan whispered, his voice laced with a sense of relief that hung in the air like a fragile thread. "Behold, not entirely dreadful." Max offered a tremulous nod, his voice caught in the web of uncertainty. His cheeks ignited with a fierce blush, yet the enveloping warmth of the coat was a siren's call he could not resist. Ethan's gaze held steady, tracing the contours of the threadbare sweater peeking from beneath the coat, the scuffed boots that had seen better days, and the crumpled bills tightly gripped in Max's hand. His lips formed a taut, unwavering line. "Do you call this place home?" he inquired, his tone artfully nonchalant. "The biting chill in the air demands the warmth of a coat. To venture out unprotected is to court discomfort." Max paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face before he finally nodded, his gaze drifting down the shadowy street that loomed ahead. Ethan trailed his eyes after him, releasing a sigh that resonated with a sense of resignation rather than irritation. "Indeed," he proclaimed. Let us not linger any longer. I shall transport you on this journey." Max's lips parted, ready to voice his dissent, yet a fierce gust of wind swept through the street, sealing his fate in an instant. With a heavy heart he moved ahead, the coat draping over him like a bittersweet embrace, both soothing and strange. Ethan stood at the threshold, his brow knitting together as he watched Max linger in uncertainty. "I assure you, I have no intentions of abducting you," he declared with a chilling calmness. Max's lips twitched, a whisper of a smile, delicate and ephemeral, yet undeniably present. He ascended into the space, the doors snapping shut behind him, banishing the chill to the outside world. The car enveloped him in a stifling warmth, a heat that clung to him like an unwelcome embrace. Max squirmed in the leather seat, the coat cocooning him, a heavy reminder of his discomfort. His hands danced nervously, fingers gliding over the sleek seams, reluctant to release their grip even as the heater hummed gently in the background. Ethan's throat rasped from the shadows, one hand beating a restless rhythm against the steering wheel, a tempest of energy brewing within him. The stillness enveloped the scene, pierced only by the sporadic flicker of turn signals and the soft, persistent murmur of the engine, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. Max gazed through the window, entranced by the delicate dance of snowflakes swirling by, pure and luminous against the shadowy backdrop. The silence loomed, thick and palpable, wrapping around them like a shroud. "Do you perhaps desire the radio to be turned on?" Ethan inquired, his gaze darting away for just a fleeting moment. Max shrugged, a subtle gesture cloaked in the shadows of his coat. "I don't mind," he murmured, his voice barely rising above a whisper. "Right," Ethan whispered, his fingers dancing over the dial as he turned it with a deliberate grace. The static crackled and then faded, giving way to a station that offered a gentle, unremarkable melody, easily lost in the ether of memory. It enveloped the stillness, a presence that lingered without shattering the quietude. The streets shimmered with a haunting frost, their faded lights flickering like distant stars in a forgotten dream. Max clutched the coat closer, curling his knees in a desperate attempt to thaw the icy chill that clung to his toes. He remained blissfully unaware of the biting chill that had gripped him, until the heater roared to life, sending a wave of warmth that ignited his fingertips with a sharp, stinging sensation. His eyes fluttered like heavy curtains, yet he willed them to part, his teeth sinking into the tender flesh of his cheek, a desperate act to stave off the encroaching darkness of sleep. Thus Ethan made another attempt, his voice shining with an almost exaggerated brightness. "That coat! Where did you find such a treasure?" Max lingered, his fingers gripping the fabric with an intensity that spoke of unspoken fears. "It belonged to my father," he murmured, his voice a gentle whisper. "Indeed, I parted with it." Ethan's brow furrowed, a storm brewing within his gaze. What compels us to question the very essence of existence? The inquiry was soft, yet it struck Max like a sudden bolt, causing him to recoil. He fixed his gaze on the dashboard, where the tiny luminous digits ticked away the miles, each one a whisper of the journey unfolding. "In honor of my sisters." At her funeral, he spoke words that lingered in the air, heavy with emotion. Mother is desperately seeking the funds, yet they fall tragically short. Ethan's fingers froze against the steering wheel, his grip tightening ever so slightly. He lingered in silence, the weight of the moment stretching uncomfortably, and Max shifted, steeling himself for a tirade on poor choices or a hollow apology that would echo with insincerity. Yet Ethan exhaled a breath, slow and trembling, and redirected his gaze to the winding road ahead. "I see," he uttered, his voice sharp and measured. "I am." "My sincerest apologies." Max merely inclined his head, his eyes falling to the coat's hem, where the stitching was so delicate it seemed to vanish into thin air. He glided his hand across it, sensing the stark contrast between its pristine fabric and the tattered edges of his own sleeves. The heater's warm breath enveloped him, lulling him into a state of drowsy surrender, despite his best efforts to resist. They came to a halt at the crimson signal, the glow of brake lights igniting the queue before them. Ethan cleared his throat once more, a gesture tinged with an air of anxious anticipation. "Does your mother work in the vicinity?" he inquired, his voice tinged with an unmistakable strain. In the dim light of the diner on Maple, Max's words tumbled out in a hushed murmur. "Primarily the haunting hours of the night. The tips leave much to be desired." Ethan nodded, a silent affirmation echoing within the depths of his mind. The light flickered to green and the car surged ahead, tires gliding like secrets over the glistening snow. "Do you perhaps have an affinity for the realm of academia?" Ethan inquired after a moment of hesitation, his inner turmoil evident. Max blinked, caught off guard, a laugh escaping him, a delicate, tremulous sound that danced in the air. He confessed, a raw honesty spilling forth before he could even ponder the weight of his words. "Yet, perhaps it's acceptable when they indulge in steaming hot lunches." Ethan expelled a sound that could have been mistaken for laughter, yet it emerged with a rigidity that betrayed its intent. He drummed his fingers once, twice, then willed them into silence. "So be it," he declared. "Neither did I." Max pivoted to face him, a spark of curiosity breaking through the veil of shyness. "But you're like incredibly wealthy," he exclaimed, then recoiled in embarrassment. "Forgive me, I must apologize. I simply—" Ethan let out a derisive snort. "No need for apologies," he declared, a flicker of a smile dancing at the corners of his mouth. "Indeed, I am. Algebra remains as unbearable as ever." Max's lips quivered, teetering on the brink of a smile. The weight on his shoulders lightened slightly, yet he clung to the coat as if it were a lifeline. Ethan's gaze flickered in her direction, a shadow of worry crossing his features, before he returned his attention to the winding path ahead. They veered onto a narrow side street where the snow lay in heavy drifts, crunching ominously beneath the tires. The structures shrank into the distance, their windows cloaked in shadows, some sealed tight with wooden barriers. Ethan's brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the fractured pavement and the solitary streetlight that danced erratically in the shadows at the corner. Max's apartment building loomed like a forgotten relic, its squat form draped in a cloak of faded red bricks, now a weary shade of muddy brown, while the stairs, slick with ice, whispered tales of treachery beneath each cautious step. Ethan glided to a halt beside the curb, the engines purring with a low, throaty growl. Max paused, his hands gripping the coat tightly for a fleeting moment before he summoned the strength to release his hold. "Thanks for the ride," he murmured, his gaze drifting away from Ethan, shrouded in unspoken thoughts. "And the coat, oh, the coat, I shall return it to you." Ethan's lips quivered once more, a subtle dance of emotion flickering across his face. "Keep it," he declared, his voice a commanding force that brooked no dissent. "We can't let you succumb to the chill before you reach the sanctuary of your door." Max's gaze lingered, his eyes wide with uncertainty, before he finally bowed his head in a reluctant nod. With a forceful shove, he flung the door wide, a flurry of snow dancing in the air as he ventured onto the treacherous, glistening sidewalk. Yet, he paused midway to the threshold, casting a lingering glance back over his shoulder. Ethan remained fixated, one hand gripping the wheel, his expression a mask of tension and enigma. Max bit down on his lip, then raised his hand in a tentative, almost fragile wave. Ethan's hand rose hesitantly, as if caught in a moment of uncertainty, unsure of its purpose. The window creaked open just a sliver, allowing a chilling breath of air to sweep inside. "Is your mother at home?" Ethan inquired, his voice a hushed whisper yet resonating with intensity. Max lingered in uncertainty. Perhaps, he mused, she ought to be, should her shift come to a close. Ethan whispered a cryptic phrase, his voice barely rising above the ambient noise, leaving Max straining to decipher the elusive words. With a dramatic flourish, he flung open his door, emerging from the car in a fluid, graceful arc. Max's eyes widened in astonishment as the figure drew near, snowflakes swirling and settling in his hair and upon his shoulders like a delicate frosty crown. The lobby door let out a haunting squeal as Max forced it open, its rusty hinges groaning in protest. Within the confines of the room, the warmth danced unpredictably as the radiators emitted their sporadic symphony of clicks. The hall lay shrouded in shadows, its wallpaper curling away from the walls like forgotten memories. Ethan's nose crinkled ever so slightly, yet he remained silent, trailing behind with his eyes flitting about, a blend of wariness and an unspoken intrigue dancing within him. The apartment door stood slightly open, a delicate glow seeping into the dimly lit hall. With a moment's hesitation, Max pushed it open, the air thick with anticipation. Madison stood in the kitchen, her shoulders drooping over the counter, a mountain of bills looming before her and deep shadows etched beneath her weary eyes. Her gaze snapped upward, a gasp escaping her lips as she beheld Ethan clad in his lavish suit, the delicate snowflakes clinging to his polished shoes like fleeting whispers of winter. I apologize," Max faltered, his voice trembling with uncertainty. He bestowed upon me the gift of a ride." Madison's eyes darted to the coat, then to Ethan, her brow furrowing in a tumultuous blend of bewilderment and trepidation. "I thank you," she managed, her voice a delicate thread, strained yet laced with grace. "You truly didn't need to go to such lengths." Ethan interrupted her with a sweeping gesture, dramatically retrieving a business card from the depths of his pocket. "Should you find yourself in need—" "Anything," he uttered, the words spilling forth in a manner both awkward and forced. "Simply make the call." Madison's lips pressed into a tight line, her gaze flickering between Max and the card, tension crackling in the air. "I appreciate it," she said, her voice taut with emotion. "Yet, we stand unscathed." Ethan's jaw tightened, yet he merely inclined his head, slipping the card away with a subtle grace. "Indeed," he murmured, retreating into the shadows. With a lingering pause in the doorway, he uttered a soft farewell, his gaze darting back to Max, who remained small and trembling, even wrapped in the coat. Then, with a heavy heart, he turned away, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in the silence. Ethan's office stood as a bastion of glass and steel, its windows soaring from floor to ceiling, framing a city cloaked in the icy embrace of winter. Yet the light appeared to flicker with a dullness, as if it too were affected by the shadow of his brooding spirit. He reclined in his chair, fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the desk, battling to concentrate on the towering pile of reports that loomed before him. The words swirled into a haze, a tempest of profit margins and forecasts that typically captivated him with ease. He pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose, yet the haunting vision of Max, trembling in that tattered sweater, fingers ghostly pale from the chill, clung tenaciously to his thoughts. Ethan glared, forcefully shoving the papers away with a flick of his wrist. "This is utterly absurd," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper, as if the very air around him shared in his disbelief. Claire, his assistant, stood poised in the doorway, a single brow arched, clutching a tablet tightly against her chest. "If we're discussing the forecast," she remarked with a hint of irony, "I find myself in agreement." 3 contracts hang in the balance, and the board looms ominously, their pressure palpable. "Not that," Ethan hissed, his voice sharp and tense. "Oh, forget it." "It's nothing," Claire hummed, a hint of doubt lacing her voice. Yet she chose not to delve deeper. She had toiled under Ethan's watchful eye for so long that she could sense the storm brewing, knowing precisely when to hold her ground and when to retreat into silence. Yet, as she passed the folder, her eyes held a moment too long, piercing and filled with unspoken understanding. "Since yesterday you've been off," she remarked, her tone playful yet sharp. "Could it possibly be linked to the way you're fixated on your phone, as if it were a ticking time bomb ready to detonate?" Ethan cast her a piercing glare, one that could have struck fear into the hearts of many, yet she remained untouched, impervious to his wrath after all this time. With a heavy heart he let the phone tumble onto the desk, a weary sigh escaping his lips as he dragged a hand across his face, burdened by the weight of the moment. He lingered, his lips pressing together in a tight line. In the midst of existence there stands a woman, and her child. Behold, in the throes of turmoil, Claire's brows arched dramatically, a silent gasp escaping her lips. "Ah, so you possess a heart after all," she declared, a mischievous grin spreading across her face as Ethan's expression turned shadowy. "I had a feeling it would come to this. I ought to ignite a thrilling betting pool with the board." "Claire," Ethan erupted. Yet it lacked the fierce intensity one might expect. She shrugged, a picture of calm amidst the chaos. "Listen, all I'm conveying is this. If it troubles you to such an extent, take action," she declared with an air of finality. "It's not as if the means are beyond your grasp." "It's far from simple," he whispered, a shadow of doubt flickering in his eyes. "I cannot simply hurl my resources at them without thought. She will forever reject it." Claire's finger danced against her tablet, her gaze drifting into a realm of contemplation. "Then let it not be a tale of charity," she proposed with a spark of defiance. "Transform it into a tale of possibility. People despise the sting of pity, yet they will gladly accept a hand up, provided it is wrapped in the cloak of dignity." Ethan's gaze sharpened, the cogs of his mind beginning to whirl against his will. "Proceed," he urged with a measured cadence. "Well," Claire drawled, her figure languidly framed in the doorway, "you've been passionately discussing the vision of broadening the community outreach program, enlisting local consultants, those who truly understand the pulse of the streets." Ethan fixed his gaze upon her, the silence stretching like a taut string, before he let out a derisive snort. "You possess a cunning nature," he remarked, a hint of admiration lacing his voice. Her lips curled into a sly smile. "That's the very reason you entrust me with your payment." As Ethan wandered back to that dilapidated street, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his coat, a half-formed yet relentless plan began to take shape in his mind. With each step the snow crackled beneath him, a symphony of winter's chill, as he drew near the door, pausing for a heartbeat before his knuckles met the wood. It was Max who responded, gazing upward with astonishment that swiftly transformed into a blend of caution and intrigue. With a moment's pause, he cast a lingering look back into the apartment, then, with a dramatic flourish, stepped aside to grant Ethan entry. Madison lingered in the kitchen, a weary echo of the vibrant woman she once was. The shadows beneath her eyes deepened, and a subtle tremor coursed through her hands as she brushed them against the dish towel. She froze at the sight of Ethan in the doorway, her eyes narrowing with intensity. "I told you we're fine," she declared, her voice steady and composed. "Your presence was not a necessity." "I know," Ethan said, his voice gravelly, betraying the weight of unspoken emotions. With a deliberate clearing of his throat, he summoned the courage to attempt once more. "Yet, My heart yearned to listen closely to what I have to say. Madison's eyes darted to Max, who lingered by the door, anxiously gnawing at his lip. Her shoulders sagged ever so slightly, a silent surrender weaving through the contours of her stance. She collapsed into a chair, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. "Very well," she whispered with a hint of defiance. "Proceed, if you dare." Ethan retrieved the business card once more, dramatically gliding it across the table's surface. "Behold," he began with an air of discomfort, "I understand that you reject the notion of charity." "I understand completely, yet my company has been on the quest for local consultants, individuals who truly grasp the essence of the community. It's an opportunity that offers compensation with part-time commitments and the freedom to choose your hours, unfettered and free without any ties binding us." Madison gazed at the card, her heart racing as if it were a wild beast poised to strike. Her fingers contorted the dish towel, knuckles pale as the moonlight. "Why?" she inquired with an air of stark indifference. "You are unaware of my existence." "You didn't owe us anything." Ethan paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He could have spun a tale, claimed it was about outreach or PR or any excuse that might resonate with reason, yet the mere glimpse of Max, fragile and ghostly in that threshold, froze him in his tracks. With an air of quiet confidence, he declared, "I can help, and I yearn to." Madison's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing with intensity. "I don't need your pity," she snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "We shall prevail. It is our unwavering commitment." Ethan fought against the overwhelming desire to let out a heavy sigh. And so it was that he often entrusted Claire with the delicate matters of the heart. He massaged the nape of his neck, searching for the elusive words that danced just beyond his grasp. "It's not pity," he declared with unwavering resolve this time. "It is but a mere occupation, a role that awaits your undeniable talent. And it's sufficient to envelop the—" He faltered, choking back the knot in his throat. He concluded softly, "just enough to cover the funeral." Madison recoiled, her eyes tightly shutting for a fleeting moment. Her shoulders drooped, the weight of tension dissolving into a visceral blend of vulnerability and fatigue. Max lingered in the doorway, fingers entwined in the fabric of Ethan's coat, a storm of emotions brewing within. The words tumbled forth, fragile and fractured. "Please, Mom," he murmured, his voice laced with urgency. "Oh, I implore you." Madison's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers froze upon the dish towel, shoulders quivering ever so slightly. The battle ebbed away, surrendering to a profound weariness that settled in her bones. She collapsed into the chair, her hand dramatically sweeping across her forehead. "Very well," she exhaled softly. "But only until we rise once more from the ashes. Enough is enough." Ethan's shoulders dropped, the weight of tension evaporating in a swift cascade. He nodded, battling the urge to reveal the weight that had just lifted from his shoulders. "Without a doubt," he declared, his voice steady and unwavering. "Only until that moment arrives." Madison's eyes held the business card captive, her fingers dancing along its edge as if she were trying to grasp the very essence of its reality. Her eyes, encircled in crimson, held no tears, and her voice cracked like fragile glass as she finally uttered her words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, hanging in the air like a fragile secret. Ethan felt a constriction in his throat. With a decisive motion, he cleared it, retreating towards the door, his nod sharp and final. "I'll have my assistant call you with the details," he declared, his voice sharp, concealing the tension that lurked beneath. "She possesses a kindness that surpasses my own, which surely will be advantageous." Max's lips quivered, hinting at a smile, and Ethan, caught off guard, felt an involuntary response tugging at his own lips. The snow continued to descend from the heavens, a gentle whisper of white that enveloped the street in a serene embrace. Ethan lingered on the threshold, casting a final, lingering glance over his shoulder. Madison lingered at the table, her shoulders heavy with unspoken thoughts, fingers dancing along the contours of the card as if seeking answers in its surface. Max lingered nearby, a delicate hand poised on her arm, eyes darting toward Ethan, shimmering with a glimmer that resembled hope, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a flicker of relief danced within Ethan's chest, a subtle yet profound shift. Madison's inaugural paycheck arrived in a pristine envelope, the company's emblem boldly emblazoned in the corner, a symbol of her hard-earned triumph. She gazed at it intently, her fingers dancing over the seal, lingering on the edge of breaking its silence. The figures within held no power to alter the course of events, not in any significant way. The absence of Lily lingered like a haunting melody, and the apartment echoed with an unsettling silence that wrapped around the night. Yet, amidst the shadows, a small solace emerged. The rent would not ignite a battle this month. With a graceful motion, she tucked the envelope into her purse, releasing a slow, deliberate breath. The office throbbed with energy, a cacophony of brightness and noise, each ringing phone and frantic keyboard tap grating against her nerves. The women in pencil skirts and heels glided through the room with an air of determination, their perfectly manicured nails catching the light and voices sharp as daggers, leaving Madison painfully conscious of her scuffed boots and well-worn blazer. With a delicate motion, she glided her hand along the fabric of her sleeve, battling the urge to pull at the tattered hem that whispered of wear and time. The spreadsheets on her screen swirled into a haze, and with a determined blink, she wrestled her mind back to clarity. It was merely a job, she whispered to herself, as if trying to convince the very essence of her being. Ephemeral, sufficient to illuminate the path and grant Lily a farewell worthy of her spirit. Her fingers gripped the mouse with a fierce resolve, unwavering yet icy. Across town, Ethan navigated through reports with a precision that sent interns darting away in his wake. His office stood as a grand fortress of shimmering glass and polished oak, the city unfurling beneath like an intricate model, a tapestry of life and ambition. Claire reclined against the doorframe, her fingers dancing over the tablet as a sly smirk played on her lips. "Ah, so a visitor has graced us with her presence," she remarked with a playful glint in her eye, her amusement barely contained. Ethan let out a low grunt, his gaze fixed firmly on the ground, refusing to meet the world around him. "If it's HR, convey that my time is currently occupied." "Not quite, Claire," declared Claire, her voice laced with a playful grin that halted him in his tracks. "He stands a tad shorter, his presence less imposing, yet still holds an air of intrigue." Ethan's brow furrowed, his gaze lifting just in time to catch Max's curious face emerging from behind the door, eyes gleaming like polished marbles, full of wonder and intrigue. The boy held the paper bag tightly against his chest, his fingers pale and trembling at the edges. His sneakers clung to his feet, dampened by the relentless drip of melting snow, forming small, shimmering puddles on the cold marble floor. "What sorcery allowed you to slip through the grasp of security?" Ethan insisted, his voice laced with surprise rather than authority. Max's eyes fluttered, his feet shifting restlessly beneath him. "The woman at the desk beckoned me forward, granting me passage to the upper realm," he muttered under his breath, casting a furtive glance at Claire, who beamed with unrestrained joy. Ethan cast a fierce glare in her direction, yet Claire merely shrugged, her eyes sparkling with playful defiance. With a piercing gaze, she declared, "He's not toting any explosives, or if he is, he's cloaked in a masterful guise." Max's lips curled ever so slightly, a hint of a smile flickering to life. Ethan exhaled sharply, his fingers pressing against the bridge of his nose in a gesture of exasperation. "Very well," he grumbled under his breath. "Step inside. Be cautious not to disturb the delicate balance of your surroundings." Max advanced with trepidation, his gaze flitting to the towering windows that framed the shimmering skyline beyond. His mouth parted slightly, a look of sheer wonder etched across his face. Ethan concealed a grin behind his palm, observing the boy stretch his neck, eager to catch a glimpse of the skyscrapers piercing the heavens, reaching for the very clouds themselves. "It's a high," Max finally uttered, his voice barely above a whisper, yet laced with awe. Ethan let out a derisive snort. "Ah, but therein lies the essence," he remarked with a hint of irony. Max bit his lip, his gaze falling to the bag clutched tightly in his hands. "I just wanted to express my gratitude," he murmured, "for all that you've done for Mom. And for the coat, a statement piece that commands attention." His ears burned a vivid crimson, and it was not the chill of the air that caused such a hue. With a sudden, clumsy motion, he propelled the bag ahead, each movement a chaotic dance of uncertainty. I brought these," Ethan said, his eyes widening as he took the bag, driven more by instinct than intention. The paper crinkled beneath his fingers, exuding warmth and a subtle, oily sheen. With a decisive motion, he pried it open, his eyes growing wide in astonishment at the sight before him. A haphazard collection of cookies, each one lovingly wrapped, yet imperfect, chocolate chips oozing in a deliciously chaotic manner, edges kissed by flames just a tad too long. "Were these creations born from your imagination?" he inquired, disbelief etched across his face. Max lowered his head, a shadow of tension crossing his features. He confessed with a hint of vulnerability that his mother had been a guiding light in his journey. "Yet, I whisked the mixture with fervor." Ethan's gaze lingered on the cookies, then shifted to the boy fidgeting with his sleeves, as an unfamiliar sensation coiled within him, sharp, yet oddly delightful. He cleared his throat, striving to summon words that would not come across as rigid or absurd. At long last, he uttered, "They appear deliciously consumable." Max's head jerked upward, his eyes sharpening with intensity. "Hey!" he exclaimed, a storm of indignation swirling within him. "They are truly remarkable." Ethan let out a soft, unexpected laugh, the sound echoing in the air around him. With a swift motion, he seized a cookie from the bag, bracing himself for an impending disaster as he took a bite. The edges bore the scars of overzealous heat, a sprinkle of salt too bold for the delicate dance of flavors, yet within they cradled warmth and softness, chocolate cascading like a sweet whisper upon his tongue. He theatrically savored each bite, his eyes narrowing in deep contemplation. Max glared, his arms folded tightly across his chest. "They're fine," he murmured, his cheeks flushed with a rosy hue. "They're not bad," Ethan confessed, a smirk dancing at the corners of his lips. "It's unlikely to be my demise." Max exhaled sharply, yet a smile danced on the edge of his lips, eager to emerge. Ethan presented the cookie with an exaggeratedly solemn expression, as if it were a matter of great importance. "You first," he declared with a flourish. "Should they find themselves tainted by poison?" Max let out a derisive snort, his eyes swirling with exasperation. "You're strange," he murmured. Yet he accepted the cookie, a smile breaking through his carefully constructed facade. They lingered in a hushed stillness, savoring each bite, as the city unfurled beneath them, while delicate snowflakes danced against the windows. Ethan reclined, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm as he shot a sidelong look at the boy. With a nonchalant air, he inquired, "So, you enjoy the coffee from vending machines?" Max contorted his features into a dramatic expression. "It's utterly repulsive," he declared with unvarnished candor. Ethan let out a hearty laugh, the sound echoing with a playful spirit. "Indeed," he consented, "yet it comes at no cost." Max's grin was a flicker of light, small yet genuine, and Ethan felt an involuntary smile bloom on his own lips in response. The silence lingered, yet it bore no weight of discomfort. Instead, it wrapped around them like a warm embrace, soothing and serene. The door burst open, fracturing the tranquility as a board member intrusively thrust his head inside, his gaze sharpening at the scene of Max lounging in one of the leather chairs, remnants of crumbs clinging to his sleeves. "Ethan!" the man began, his tone sharp and commanding. "Could this be—" "Everything is perfectly all right," Ethan interjected, his voice icy and cutting through the air. "My schedule is overflowing with tasks and responsibilities." The man's mouth clamped shut, his eyes igniting with a fierce and discontented glint. He faltered, his eyes sinking to Max, before forcing a fragile smile to his lips. "Without a doubt," he declared, his voice sharp and precise. "We shall. Let us pause this moment and return to it in due time." The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed, yet the atmosphere remained thick with discontent. Ethan's jaw clenched, his fingers drumming fiercely against the desk. Max's gaze shot upwards, shadows of concern swirling in his eyes. "Did I truly? Absolutely not," Ethan interjected, his voice softening the moment. "It isn't your burden to bear." Max lingered in uncertainty, retreating slightly into the confines of the chair, as if the weight of doubt pressed heavily upon him. Ethan paused, a heavy sigh escaping his lips as he ran his fingers through his tousled hair. "Merely the mundane affairs of the office," he whispered with a hint of resignation. "There is absolutely no cause for concern." The boy's eyes were drawn to the door, then returned to Ethan with a weight of unspoken thoughts. His fingers coiled tightly in his sleeves, a tempest of nerves brewing within him. "I can go," Max whispered, a hint of resolve in his voice, "should you find yourself caught up in the whirlwind of life." Ethan's brow furrowed, as the words stirred a deep, unsettling ache beneath his ribs. "You don't have to," he murmured, his voice a gentle whisper, laced with an unexpected tenderness. "The clock is on my side." Max lingered in uncertainty, yet the glimmer of relief in his eyes was unmistakable. He reclined, delicately biting the edge of a cookie, his shoulders gradually unfurling from their tense hunch. For a spell, they exchanged words, weaving tales of school escapades, vending machine mishaps, and the unforgettable moment Ethan found himself trapped in an elevator with a jazz quartet, the air thick with music and laughter. The laughter, though modest, was genuine, casting a glow over the room that outshone even the dazzling city lights. Ethan observed Max's grin, crumbs adorning his chin and eyes sparkling with mischief, and sensed a warmth begin to unfurl within him, slow and strange yet undeniably welcome. The office lay in a stillness so profound it enveloped Preston from every angle, pierced only by the soft hum of the heater and the delicate whisper of paper rustling in the silence. Ethan gazed out the window, the city lights sprawling into the abyss of night, yet his mind wandered far beyond the spreadsheets and contracts that lay in disarray upon his desk. Max's laughter lingered in the air, a vibrant and carefree sound, and Ethan felt a flicker of a smile dance on his lips at the recollection. It was peculiar how swiftly the child had burrowed beneath his defenses, slipping through the fissures he believed were securely locked away. He swept a hand across his face, a deep sigh escaping his lips. The sky loomed in a brooding gray, burdened by thick clouds, while the glass revealed a man worn to the bone, with shadows etched deeply beneath his weary eyes. In that fleeting instant, his gaze fell upon yet another apartment, another winter, where the chill crept through walls too fragile and blankets frayed to mere whispers of warmth. The flashback struck with a sudden intensity, his mother's hands, calloused yet comforting, drawing the blankets closer as if they could stave off the gnawing hunger lurking in the shadows. The fractured plaster loomed ominously above his bed, while the radiator emitted a sporadic hiss, a reluctant companion that only functioned in fits and starts. A Christmas tree, a mere 3 feet in stature, adorned with ornaments crafted from foil and paper, stands as a testament to resilience, while his mother's smile, stretched thin yet brimming with effort, strives to fill the space with warmth and love. Ethan's jaw tightened, a storm brewing within him. He wrenched his eyes away from the window, forcefully shoving the memories deep into the recesses of his mind, where they could no longer haunt him. This was never about him. It was a tale of Max and Madison embarking on a quest to finally make their mark in the world. The door burst open, unannounced, as Claire strode in, tablet clutched tightly, her gaze piercing through the air with an intensity that demanded attention. Ethan raised an eyebrow, yet the expression she cast upon him was somber, devoid of any trace of mirth. "You must witness this," she declared, her voice taut with urgency. With a flourish, she flung a magazine onto his desk, the headlines blaring in audacious bold print. A snapshot of Madison, hazy and caught unawares, wrapped tightly in her coat, with Max beside her, eyes wide and filled with surprise. The title oozed with malice. "Fair Maiden in Peril or Fortune Seeker" is the billionaire CEO's charity facing a storm of controversy. Ethan felt his blood freeze in his veins. With a swift motion he seized the magazine, his gaze racing over the words, distorted truths, quotes wrenched from their rightful place, and bold allegations that Madison had ensnared him in a web of financial deceit. Fury writhed, searing and acrid beneath his chest. "Whom do we seek?" he snarled, his voice a dark whisper laced with menace. Claire stood resolute, unwavering in the face of it all. "The Sentinel," she declared. "It's already taking flight across the digital realm. The comments leave much to be desired." Ethan's grip intensified, the paper twisting and writhing beneath his fingers. "Summon their editor to the line at once." In a sudden burst of fury, he shattered the calm. "At this very moment." Claire was a whirlwind of motion, her fingers dancing across the tablet with fervor. Ethan hurled the magazine away, his anger boiling over, a tempest ready to erupt. It was one thing to sully his name with the filth of scandal. He had grown accustomed to that bitter taste. Yet, to ensnare Madison and Max in this web, distorting the meager assistance he attempted to offer, that plunged into an abyss of treachery. The phone rang twice, each chime echoing through the silence, before a voice finally broke the tension and answered. "Behold, the illustrious Chad Lang, the esteemed Sentinel editor." A voice slithered through the air, dripping with smugness and slick as oil. "What grand fortune brings you to my presence? You are fully aware of the reason behind my call." Ethan let out a low, menacing growl. "Withdraw the article immediately, at this very moment." Lang let out a chuckle, its harshness slicing through the air. "Oh, how sensitive we are, it seems. It's merely a transaction, Hale. It's impossible to resist the allure of a captivating Cinderella tale, particularly one that takes an unexpected turn." Ethan's teeth clenched in a fierce symphony of tension. "This is a grave injustice," he erupted. "Prepare yourself, for my legal team shall soon make their presence known." "Oh, do enlighten me." Lang let out a derisive laugh. "Truth is an armor that shields one from the shadows of defamation. Or perhaps believable." The line crackled, a tautness in the air that felt as if it could shatter at any moment. Ethan's hand trembled, a fierce battle waged within as he fought to maintain the steadiness of his voice. "Issue a retraction," he exclaimed, his voice sharp and commanding, "or I shall ensure that your next endeavor leads you to the sizzling griddle of burger flipping." Lang let out a derisive snort. "Oh, undoubtedly," he scoffed with a mocking grin. "Wishing you all the best on that journey." The call concluded with a sharp click, plunging the room into a profound silence that echoed like a haunting melody. Ethan's hands quivered, rage twisting like a serpent in the depths of his belly. Claire's eyes shimmered with a storm of worry, her fingers anxiously twisting the strap of her bag as if it were a lifeline. "What comes next?" she inquired softly, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's jaw clenched with tension. "I shall make my way there." With a sudden burst of energy, he stormed towards the door, his resolve unyielding. "They crave a tale? Very well, I shall grant them one." The lobby unfolded like a dream, a swirling dance of marble and glass, while the car ride transformed into a whirlwind of city lights, streaking past in a mesmerizing haze. As Ethan burst into the Sentinel's office, his cheeks ablaze and tie askew, the receptionist's eyes widened in shock, her fingers trembling as they reached for the phone. Summon Lang to emerge from the shadows of his regretful existence. Ethan's voice rumbled like distant thunder, low and menacing. At this very moment, Lang emerged, a sly grin playing on his lips, a coffee cup cradled in his hand, his eyes sparkling with a triumphant gleam. "Ethan," he greeted, his voice dripping with sweetness, "what a surprise to see you here. It is imperative to maintain a serious demeanor." Ethan's fists tightened, his nails digging fiercely into his palms. "The article in question," he hissed, his words sharp and frigid. "Take it back. My sincerest apologies. Or I swear. Or what will unfold." Lang cast a scornful glance, a smirk curling at the corners of his lips. "Are you truly prepared to take legal action? Proceed if you dare. It may not present itself in the most flattering light, however. A powerful billionaire CEO unleashes his wrath upon a humble publication for the audacity to imply he is anything less than a saint." The door burst open, shattering the tension of the moment. Max stood there, his eyes shimmering with surprise and his cheeks aglow from the biting chill, fists clenched tightly within the embrace of his oversized sleeves. Madison trailed behind, her complexion ghostly and taut, lips sealed in a tight line. Lang's smirk blossomed into a wicked grin. "Ah, the dazzling star of the spectacle," he drawled with a flourish. "What's it like, young one? I can only imagine the thrill of it all." Max's jaw clenched, his shoulders bracing with intensity. He fixed Lang with a piercing gaze, a fierce intensity that caused Ethan to momentarily falter. "You're lying," Max declared, his voice trembling yet unwavering. "My mother never sought any of this turmoil." Mr. Hale, with noble intentions, yearned to extend his hand in aid. Lang let out a soft melodic chuckle, a sound that danced through the air like a whisper of mischief. "Of course, kid," he scoffed with a dramatic flair. "Ah, the familiar refrain echoed by many." "Indeed," Max exclaimed, his voice soaring with intensity. She craved nothing. She teetered on the edge of refusal. You stand there, oblivious to the depths of understanding that elude you. You fabricate tales merely to peddle your publications. Lang's eyes narrowed, his mouth contorting in a dramatic display. "Listen, you little—" Ethan surged forward, his jaw clenched, a storm brewing within him. "Beware," he cautioned, his voice a whisper laced with danger. "That is quite sufficient." Max's hands quivered with tension, yet he stood his ground, his chin raised defiantly. "You're just cruel," he spat, his cheeks burning with indignation. "Crafting tales of deception about those you've never encountered. Your mother must be bursting with pride." Lang's jaw dropped, speech caught in a web of disbelief. The stillness that ensued was overwhelming, the receptionist's gaze frozen in shock and disbelief. Even Ethan found himself momentarily frozen, his eyes wide with astonishment. The smirk evaporated from Lang's lips, his cheeks igniting with a tempest of rage and a flicker of something more profound, perhaps shame, lurking beneath the surface. His jaw moved in silence, eyes flickering between Ethan and Max, his throat constricting with unspoken tension. "Indeed," Ethan drawled, his voice as cold as ice. "I demand that retraction at this very moment." Lang shot a fierce glare, his teeth gritted, yet the fire of battle had flickered away from his gaze. With a fierce snarl, he pivoted sharply, charging back into the office, the door crashing shut in his wake. Ethan released a breath, the weight of tension dissipating into the air, and cast his gaze downward at Max, whose face was still flushed and body quivering ever so slightly, fingers entwined in the fabric of his sleeves. He extended his hand, paused in the moment, then placed it on the boy's shoulder, his grip both strong and gentle. Max gazed upward, his eyes brimming with a mix of wonder and trepidation. Ethan's lips curled ever so slightly, hinting at the ghost of a smile. "Well done," he declared, his voice a rugged melody, warmth seeping through the edges of his gruffness. Max blinked, astonishment dancing in his eyes. Then a grin broke forth, small yet radiant, his cheeks still flushed with color. Ethan let out a soft laugh, a warmth unfurling in his chest, a rare moment of relief breaking through the heaviness of the day. Madison's voice cut through the air, sharp and unyielding, as if she were severing ties with a haunting memory. "This has to stop," she declared, her hands entwined so fiercely that her knuckles blanched to a ghostly hue. "Alas, we find ourselves at an impasse. This simply cannot continue." Ethan gazed at her, his words tangled in the depths of his throat. The hallway loomed in shadows, the lights above sputtering like dying stars, yet her gaze burned bright with resolve, her lips set in a fierce, unyielding line. Max lingered by the kitchen door, a shadowy figure cloaked in silence, his hands nervously twisting the hem of his sleeve. "I don't understand," Ethan murmured, his voice laced with caution, each word deliberate and measured. "Should this pertain to the article, Lang is already in the process of issuing a retraction. Rest assured, it is being taken care of with utmost attention. It's more than that," Madison declared, her voice trembling yet resolute. "It encompasses all that is the wealth, the position. Eyes follow my every step as I traverse the street, Ethan, as if I were merely a project for someone's benevolence. The weight of this burden is too much to bear any longer." Ethan's hands balled into fists at his sides, his jaw set with fierce determination. "You're not—" he began, but Madison's headshake sliced through his words, sharp and weary. "You don't understand," she exclaimed, her breath hitching in her throat. "We have always found a way to persevere. We shall not rely on favors. It's not a handout," Ethan exclaimed, his voice escalating before he could rein it in. "It's a lifeline, for you, my dear, to Max." And so it concludes. Madison's lips contorted, a haunting blend of sorrow and resentment. "Alas, we cannot bear it," she lamented, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "Forgive me." The words fell like a thunderclap, resounding with an undeniable finality. Ethan's throat seethed with fire as words clashed and swirled in a tempest of turmoil. Yet Madison was already retreating, her fingers gripping the doorknob with a fierce intensity. Her gaze danced toward Max, a tender warmth igniting in her eyes, only to swiftly retreat into the shadows. Max lingered in uncertainty, his gaze flickering between them, shadows of doubt clouding his eyes. His hands coiled around the sleeves of Ethan's coat, slightly oversized yet enveloping him in a cocoon of warmth and solace. For a fleeting instant he appeared poised to contest, his lips parting in anticipation. In that moment, Madison's gaze locked onto him, a silent plea shimmering in her eyes, while Max's shoulders fell in defeat. He clenched his jaw, a fierce tension coursing through him as his eyes fell to the ground, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Ethan advanced, his fingers quivering with anticipation. Yet Madison's hand descended upon the door, drawing it partially closed with a decisive motion. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely rising above a fragile thread of sound, "for all that exists. Yet it is. The moment has arrived for us to take matters into our own hands." The door clicked shut, a subtle sound that resonated in the stillness, reverberating with an unsettling finality. Ethan's gaze lingered on the peeling paint, his breath quickening, constricted in his chest. The icy tendrils clawed at his coat, infiltrating every seam and button, yet he remained untouched by the chill. With a swift pivot, he spun around, the snow crackling like glass beneath his feet. and marched purposefully toward the car. The driver stole a glance upward, his eyes widening at the dramatic shift in Ethan's expression. Yet he chose the path of silence, sensing the weight of the moment. The engine roared to life, streetlights dissolving into ghostly streaks as the city raced by in a whirlwind of shadows. Ethan's hands trembled, a subtle yet urgent dance of fingers drumming a frantic cadence upon his knee. The heater hummed a relentless tune, enveloping him in a suffocating warmth, yet he found himself unable to cast aside the heavy coat that clung to him like a second skin. "It is for the best," he reassured himself, as shadows danced around him. "If that is her desire." Yet the words lingered uneasily, refusing to find their rightful place, no matter how often he uttered them. The board meeting the following morning unfolded like a chaotic symphony, voices clashing in a cacophony, spreadsheets and forecasts hurled across the table in a whirlwind of tension. Ethan's gaze lingered on the charts, yet his mind drifted far beyond their confines, the pen dancing whimsically between his fingers. His gaze was drawn repeatedly to the clock, each minute dragging on like a weighty shadow, time itself reluctant to move forward. As a board member cleared his throat, a palpable tension filled the air, eyes narrowing with scrutiny. Ethan snapped back to reality, the weight of judgment pressing down on him. "Hail!" the man barked, his lips drawn tight. I inquired, "Has the matter with the Sentinel been resolved?" Ethan's brow furrowed in a tempest of discontent. "It's being handled," he declared with a sharp finality. "A retraction is being printed." "What of the woman?" the man pressed, his voice a chilling whisper that cut through the air. "You are." Bewilderment. Ethan's fingers tightened around the pen, the pressure so intense it threatened to shatter the fragile instrument in his grasp. "That is of no concern to you," he snarled, his voice dripping with disdain. "Ah, but indeed it is," another member interjected, their voice dripping with a velvety allure. "Investors are on edge. Your whimsical endeavor is casting shadows on their perception of your commitments. Perhaps the moment has arrived to release it into the ether." Ethan's jaw clenched, yet the words remained trapped, suffocating in the depths of his throat. The eyes encircling the table were dull yet charged with anticipation, poised for what was to come. Claire's gaze danced with a hint of remorse, yet remained ensnared in a web of helplessness. Ethan released a measured breath, the tension coiling like a serpent beneath his ribs. "Very well," he snapped. "Leave it to me. I will take care of it." The remainder of the meeting unfolded in a whirlwind. Choices forged, budgets reshaped, and Ethan's mind throbbed under the immense pressure of it all. As he stormed back to his office, the door crashing shut with a force that echoed his inner turmoil, he felt the tension coiling within him, ready to burst at any moment. He plunged into his work with fervor, time dissolving into an endless stream, papers piling precariously, emails echoing like relentless sirens. It proved futile. No matter how many reports he immersed himself in, the silence loomed, vast and desolate. He hovered over the phone, fingers trembling as they danced above the keys. A number half-dialed before he unleashed his fury, slamming it down with a force that echoed his inner turmoil. He whispered to himself, a mantra of detachment. It wasn't his problem. She fiercely rejected his offer of assistance. Yet Max's visage remained, eyes aglow with bewilderment, fingers gripping the coat as if it were the very essence of survival. Ethan's hands danced with an uncontainable energy, yet he willed them to remain anchored to the keyboard, frowning at the piercing brightness of the display. The call pierced the stillness of the night, a sharp and urgent buzz that shattered the silence, echoing against the desk as the clock struck past midnight. Ethan seized the device, a scowl etched across his face as he stared at the mysterious number flashing on the screen. Yet a chilling sensation coiled within him, a dark omen lurking in the depths of his being. "Is this, Mr. Hale?" A voice quavered, youthful and filled with trepidation. Behold, I am known as Ms. Lewis. At Riverside Elementary, I share my passion for learning with eager young minds. Here in my office, I find myself in the presence of Max. Ethan's breath faltered, a hesitant whisper caught in the throes of uncertainty. What transpired? In a sudden burst of fury, he shattered the calm. The teacher paused, their voice barely a whisper. She spoke with a heavy heart. There was a fight. Maxwell, he revealed that some boys were whispering unkind words about his mother. He bears no wounds, yet he stands resolute in his silence, refusing to reach out to her. Simply continue to declare that he desires you. Ethan's chair scraped against the floor with a piercing screech, his coat flung over his shoulders in a whirlwind of impulse. "I'm on my way," he declared, his voice taut with urgency. The journey unfolded in a whirlwind, tires whispering against the slushy terrain, headlights piercing the enveloping darkness. Ethan leaped from the car before it had fully come to a halt, his feet pounding against the school's entrance, where the snow surrendered to the warmth, leaving glistening wet patches on the tiles beneath him. The office door stood slightly open, a cascade of light pouring into the dimly lit hall. Max perched on the bench outside, his knees pulled close, hands clenched fiercely within the fabric of his sleeves. His cheek burned with a fierce crimson, while his knuckles bore the marks of a brutal struggle, bruised and raw. Yet he remained oblivious to Ethan's approach, his jaw set with a tension that spoke of unyielding pain. Ethan sank to the ground, his heart thundering in his chest like a drum echoing in the silence. "Max," he uttered, his voice gravelly and raw, "what transpired?" Max's breath caught in his throat, his gaze locked onto the ground beneath him. "And they were whispering things about Mom," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper, "labeling her with unkind words, declared that we were merely exploiting you for your wealth." Ethan's chest constricted, a fierce blaze of anger igniting within him. He extended his hand, fingers poised on Max's shoulder, a grip both resolute and gentle. "That's not true," he declared, his voice a hushed whisper, yet unwavering. "Are you aware of that, my friend?" Max's shoulders quaked, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his fingers coiled like a serpent, gripping the sleeves with an intensity that spoke of unspoken turmoil. Yet he drew closer, his forehead colliding with Ethan's coat, breaths escaping in hurried, uneven gasps. Ethan's throat ignited with fire, his hands tenderly drawing the boy nearer, enveloping him in a cocoon of warmth. In that fleeting instant, the universe shrank to the delicate sound of muffled sobs and the lingering aroma of soap and sweetness entwined within Max's hoodie. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt a chilling dread grip his heart, a fear that transcended mere transactions, as he confronted the haunting possibility of losing something far more precious. The call pierced the stillness of the night, yanking Ethan from a fitful slumber at his desk, as the city lay sprawled in shadowy silence beyond the office windows. The screen pulsed with an enigmatic number, and for a fleeting moment, he contemplated letting it slip away, too weary and too spent to confront yet another challenge. Yet a tempest brewed within his chest, a constricting force that compelled him to seize the phone just before it succumbed to the silence of voicemail. "Mr. Hale, is it?" A voice trembled, laced with tension and uncertainty. "Welcome to the realm of Riverside Medical. Max has arrived, and he requested that we reach out to you." Ethan sprang to his feet, the words still echoing in the air, his coat snatched from the chair as his heart thundered wildly in his chest. "Is he wounded?" he erupted, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The nurse paused, caught in a moment of uncertainty. "Not in the physical sense. No," she replied with deliberate caution. Yet, in a moment of sheer despair, his mother crumpled to the ground at her workplace. Fatigue lingers in the air, the doctor muses, yet she must remain for the night. Maxwell, he stands his ground, defiantly anchored in the waiting room. Ethan's jaw tightened, his words slicing through the air, sharp and rapid. "I'll be there in 20, he snapped, his footsteps echoing as he stormed toward the door. The city rushed by in a whirlwind of gray and white, snow swirling in fierce gusts that battered the windows with a relentless fury. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel with fierce intensity, knuckles pale as bone, his jaw set in a rigid line that throbbed with tension. The hospital lights shimmered with a chilling brilliance, casting reflections on the glistening, ice-slick pavement. He discovered Max curled up on a bench outside, the hoodie drawn close, fingers quaking as they gripped the fabric with desperation. The boy's head hung low, knees pulled tightly to his chest, each breath a shuddering whisper, fogging the air in uneven bursts. The vision seized Ethan, a clenched fist of dread twisting violently within him. He cleared his throat, a whisper of sound more delicate than ever before. "Max!" Max's head jerked upward, his eyes wide and rimmed with crimson, breath hitching in his throat. Relief surged, swift and visceral, piercing through the fatigue etched upon his visage. His shoulders sagged, a wave of relief washing over him as he leapt from the bench, nearly stumbling in his haste. Mr. Hale, a figure shrouded in intrigue. He faltered, his voice a fragile whisper, trembling with uncertainty. In that moment of uncertainty, I found myself at a loss, unsure of whom to reach out to. Ethan's chest constricted, his fingers dancing restlessly at his sides. He extended his hand, a spontaneous gesture, as his fingers gripped Max's shoulder with unwavering resolve. The boy trembled, his tiny fingers gripping the fabric of Ethan's coat, a picture of urgency and vulnerability. "It's all right," Ethan declared, his voice a gravelly whisper, yet unwavering. "Your choice was indeed the right one." Max's breath caught in his throat, his shoulders curling inward like a wilting flower, and Ethan felt a sharp pang in his heart as if it were being twisted by an unseen hand. He grasped the boy's shoulder, guiding him softly toward the car as the snow descended in a swirling dance, wrapping itself around Max's hair in wet, delicate curls. "Come on," Ethan whispered, his voice laced with urgency. "Come, let us envelop you in warmth." Max lingered, casting a furtive glance over his shoulder at the looming hospital doors, his eyes shadowed with doubt and trepidation. "But, Mother, she will emerge unscathed." Ethan vowed with a conviction that belied the turmoil within him. "I shall remain until she has departed. Vow—" Max bit his lip, his gaze dancing like a flickering flame. Yet the weight of exhaustion enveloped him, dragging his shoulders down and urging his feet to move forward. He lurched into the passenger seat, hoodie drawn closer, eyes heavy and glazed with exhaustion. Ethan closed the door with deliberate care, a pulse of tension vibrating beneath his skin before he slipped into the driver's seat. The journey unfolded in silence, the gentle hum of the heater wrapping around them like a comforting embrace, while Max's weary head succumbed to the allure of the window's cool glass. Ethan cast furtive glances, his breath hitching as he took in the shallow, uneven rise of her chest. Yet the boy remained oblivious, his eyes sealed shut, his face a canvas of utter fatigue. The penthouse loomed in darkness, a hushed sanctuary where the city lights danced like whispers, casting ethereal shadows that flickered across the walls. Ethan flicked on a lamp, casting a gentle glow that danced in the shadows, and turned to see Max teetering like a fragile leaf in the wind, his eyes fluttering open and closed with a languid grace. "Come on!" Ethan whispered, leading him toward the couch with an air of urgency. Only for a fleeting moment. "It is time for you to surrender to the embrace of slumber." Max whispered a secret, words barely escaping his lips, yet he surrendered to the embrace of the cushions, his eyelids fluttering shut as if drawn into a dreamscape almost instantly. Ethan lingered, his hands gripping the back of the couch, as he observed the boy's expression soften, the tension melting away from his features. He released a slow breath, the tension seeping away like ink in water, and reached for a blanket from the hall closet, draping it over Max with hands that trembled ever so slightly. Max nestled into it with an instinctive grace, fingers entwining in the fabric, breath steadying in a rhythmic dance. Ethan lingered, his throat constricted, fingers twitching restlessly at his sides. The weight of exhaustion clung to him, relentless and suffocating, yet he found himself rooted in place, unable to stir, not with Max's breath whispering softly and rhythmically beneath the blanket. With a heavy sigh, he sank into the couch, legs sprawled out, shoulders surrendering to the embrace of the cushions. The silence enveloped him, a gentle embrace, and in an instant his eyelids grew heavy, his head falling back as his breath synchronized with Max's rhythmic cadence. In the dim twilight of slumber, a tiny hand sought the edge of his coat, grasping with fervor, and without a moment's hesitation, Ethan's fingers enveloped it, his hold unwavering and resolute. Morning emerged, shrouded in a cloak of gray, as snow enveloped the city in a hushed embrace. Madison's eyes fluttered open, struggling to grasp the nurse's words, cleared for discharge, just exhaustion and dehydration, nothing more. With a heavy heart, she swung her legs off the cot, the world around her swirling in a dizzying dance. She hailed a cab, her fingers entwined in the hospital blanket that clung to her shoulders, her heart racing with fervor. The driver muttered complaints about the relentless snow and the snarl of traffic, yet her ears were deaf to his words, her gaze was locked on the skyline, her mind a whirlwind of 1,000 tantalizing what-ifs. The ascent in the elevator felt like an eternity, each chime echoing ominously, and as the doors finally parted, her hands trembled, knuckles pale from the fierce grip on her purse strap. She lingered at the threshold, the door ajar, a golden glow pouring into the corridor, then pushed it open further, her breath hitching in her throat. Max lay nestled on the couch, the blanket wrapped tightly around him, his cheeks aglow with the warmth of slumber. His head lay gently upon Ethan's shoulder, vulnerable and tender, fingers gripping the edge of the man's coat with an unyielding grasp. Ethan's arm draped languidly around the boy, his head thrown back, mouth agape in a serene slumber, dark hair tousled against the cushions. One hand lay gently upon Max's back, a tender gesture even in the realm of dreams, the thumb tracing languid circles with a delicate touch. Madison's chest heaved, her hand darting to cover her mouth in shock. Her eyes burned, tears welling up fiercely and unexpectedly, yet she remained transfixed, unable to tear herself away, rooted in the doorway as the morning light danced with dust motes in a shimmering golden haze. Max murmured softly in his slumber, drawing nearer, and Ethan's arm instinctively wrapped tighter, his expression softening, the creases of worry fading away. The vision shattered something deep and tender within Madison's heart, tears cascading forth unexpectedly. With a hand pressed to her mouth, she trembled, her shoulders shaking as her gaze remained locked on the entwined figures lost in slumber, a gentle warmth cascading softly and silently throughout the room. After weeks of relentless pressure, the heavy burden on her chest began to lift, if only slightly, giving way to a tender, soothing sensation. Hope. The invitation unfolded with an air of discomfort, each word a hesitant dancer, tripping over its own feet, as if Ethan, a master of eloquence in boardrooms and before investors, had suddenly lost his voice. He loomed in Madison's kitchen, hands buried deep within the confines of his coat pockets, his mouth a rigid line, as though preparing for an impending storm. "It's merely a gala," he declared, his tone sharper than the edge of a finely honed blade. "A corporate endeavor. There is no obligation upon you." He paused, a moment of uncertainty hanging in the air, then cleared his throat with a deliberate intensity. "I merely entertained the notion that you could. I yearn to break free for a single fleeting night." Madison's eyes widened, the spatula hovering dramatically in the air as she paused mid-flip, caught in a moment of unexpected revelation. The apartment radiated a cozy warmth, as soft yellow light cascaded over the counter, while the rich aroma of maple syrup lingered heavily in the air. Max sat at the table, his gaze darting between them, eyes wide with anticipation, fork suspended in mid-air, caught in a moment of suspense. "A grand gala?" Madison echoed, her brow arched in intrigue. Ethan moved, a sudden twitch in his shoulder accompanied by a half-hearted shrug. With a sense of urgency, he declared, "Strictly professional." Silence reigns supreme. With an air of sophistication and elegance, the message unfolds, inviting the reader into a realm of refined discourse. Each word is carefully chosen, resonating with a sense of purpose and gravitas, as if to convey the weight of the subject matter at hand. The tone is poised, yet it carries an undercurrent of intensity, urging the audience to engage deeply with the content presented. This is not merely a communication. It is an invitation to partake in a dialogue that transcends the ordinary, beckoning the listener to explore the depths of thought and reflection. Only the essence of food and the rhythm of music, a moment to exhale. Madison's lips curled slightly, her eyes dancing with a blend of amusement and tenderness. "That sounds rather stiff," she remarked with a hint of sarcasm. Ethan let out a derisive snort, his eyes swirling with exasperation. "You understand my meaning," he whispered, a shadow of intensity in his voice. "There's absolutely no weight upon your shoulders. You have the power to refuse." Mac's head jerked upward, his eyes ablaze with intensity. "May we, dear mother?" he erupted, almost leaping from his seat. "I've yet to experience the thrill of a true celebration." Madison paused, her eyes darting between Ethan, whose shoulders were rigid and jaw set in determination, and Max, brimming with uncontainable enthusiasm. She let out a dramatic sigh, a mix of frustration and affection swirling within her. "Very well, then." She finally gave in, yet should the music beckon and the dance floor call, you shall navigate that realm alone. Max leaped with joy, the fork clattering dramatically against his plate. Ethan's shoulders eased, his mouth curling into a semblance of a grin, a flicker of joy breaking through the tension. On the fateful night of the gala, Madison caressed her dress for the 10th time, her fingers dancing anxiously over phantom wrinkles. It draped gently in a soft green hue, a gift from a neighbor, its shoulders cascading with a hint of looseness. Yet, when Max's eyes widened at her emergence from the bedroom, she felt a surge of satisfaction, believing it was enough to make an impact. Ethan's car glided to a stop, its headlights slicing through the swirling snowflakes like a beacon in the storm. He emerged, his tuxedo sharp and impeccably tailored, a vision of elegance and poise. Yet the manner in which he tousled his hair, leaving it in delightful disarray, bestowed upon him an almost youthful charm. "You look," he began, his words faltering in the air. "Excellent. It's quite lovely, isn't it?" Madison stifled a grin, her cheeks aflame with warmth. "You're actually a good person," she remarked with a warm smile. Max danced on his toes, eyes wide with wonder as they approached the venue, its glass walls shimmering with the glow of chandeliers, laughter spilling forth like a warm embrace. He tugged at his tie, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face as his nose crinkled in response. "Must I don't this attire?" he murmured, his fingers wrestling with the knot, a silent battle of will and frustration. Ethan let out a hearty laugh, tousling his hair with a playful flourish. "Only for a fleeting moment," he declared. "You shall endure." Max let out an exasperated sigh, yet he held his ground, following closely as they crossed the threshold. The room unfolded like a grand tapestry of tailored suits, where the melodic clinking of glasses danced alongside the sultry whispers of soft jazz weaving through the atmosphere. Madison's shoulders tensed, her eyes flitting about like a startled bird, yet Ethan's hand found its place at the small of her back, a comforting warmth anchoring her amidst the storm. "You're fine," he whispered, his voice a soft caress in the stillness. "I have you in my grasp." Madison's breath hitched, yet she acquiesced, allowing herself to lean into the caress, if only slightly. Executives converged, their smiles gleaming and their gazes piercing. Yet Max's forthrightness sliced through the crowd with precision, a small yet sincere barrage of inquiries that left even the most eloquent speakers gasping for breath. Ethan concealed a smirk behind his glass, observing the boy as he shattered the frigid barriers with nothing but innocent wonder. With a spark of enthusiasm, Max leaned in toward one board member, his head tilted in intrigue. "Why is it that wealth does not protect one from the challenges of life?" The man gasped, his drink nearly escaping his grasp as his eyes widened in shock, while Ethan fought to suppress a laugh, nearly sending champagne shooting through his nostrils. Madison stifled a giggle behind her hand, her eyes sparkling with mischief, cheeks flushed with a rosy hue. As the speeches commenced, the air, thick with anticipation, began to dissipate, leaving Max to lean heavily against Ethan, his face aglow and fingers smeared with the remnants of sweet treats. Madison's arm grazed Ethan's, a gentle warmth igniting between them, and he remained still, captivated. As Ethan stepped into the spotlight, the microphone chilled his grip, its unforgiving metal gnawing at his fingertips. He cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, pausing on Madison's wide eyes, Max's eager grin, hands nervously twisting the edge of her shawl. "The holiday season," Ethan began, his voice a gravelly whisper yet unwavering, "is a time for family, a time for returning to the warmth of home." His gaze darted to Madison, breath hitching, determined to ensure that no one endures this solitude alone. Silence enveloped the room, whispers fading into nothingness. Ethan released a breath, his fingers dancing restlessly upon the podium. "Beginning next year," he declared with unwavering resolve, "the Hale Foundation will unveil a groundbreaking initiative aimed at empowering struggling single parents, guiding them towards a path of dignity and self-sufficiency." Madison's breath hitched, her eyes widening in shock, fingers gripping the shawl tightly. Max stared up at her, his mouth agape, eyes shimmering with bewilderment and a flicker of warmth. Ethan's throat constricted, yet he summoned the strength to release the words, his voice a mere whisper. "This is for Lily," he declared, his eyes locked onto Madison's astonished expression, determined to ensure that no one else endures such solitude. The applause began as a gentle murmur, gradually swelling into a thunderous ovation, yet Ethan was oblivious, his gaze locked onto Madison, her hands clasped over her mouth, shoulders quaking with emotion. Max's eyes sparkled with unshed tears, her lips trembling as her fingers clung desperately to her sleeve. Returning to the apartment, an enveloping silence unfurled, tender and gentle, as snow danced and twirled outside the window. Madison's fingers danced in a frantic rhythm, her eyes rimmed with a fiery hue yet devoid of tears, her breath a wild, erratic whisper. That was a moment etched in time. Her voice trembled as she began. "Ethan, you needn't have done this. I yearned to—" He interrupted, his voice jagged and harsh. It transcended the mere act of charity. It was a moment suspended in time, a breath held in anticipation where the air crackled with unspoken possibilities and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next act to unfold. His throat quivered with a silent struggle. In the shadows of our struggle we stood alone, abandoned by those who could have lent a hand. In the tender days of my childhood, Madison's breath quivered, her eyes wide and shimmering with an unsettling intensity. Max stepped forward, uncertainty dissolving like mist, and enveloped Ethan in a fierce embrace, his face pressed into the fabric of his coat, breath trembling with intensity. Ethan's arms froze for a fleeting moment, caught off guard, before enveloping the boy in a firm yet gentle embrace, his breath catching in a tumultuous rhythm. "Gratitude flows from my heart," Max's words tumbled out, a thick murmur cloaked in shadows. "Gratitude flows like a river, doesn't it?" Madison's lips quivered, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, as she extended her hand, warm and delicate, to rest gently upon Ethan's sleeve. Her smile trembled, cheeks glistening with tears, yet it radiated with an undeniable authenticity. Ethan's breath quivered, his hands trembling delicately as they wove through Max's hair. The apartment exuded a serene stillness, yet it was far from desolate. Gentle lamplight danced upon the drifting dust motes while the heaters provided a rhythmic hum, weaving a comforting tapestry of sound. Outside, the snow cascaded gently and without end, enveloping the street in a pristine shroud of white. Max's breath steadied, fingers gripping with intensity, while Madison's hand descended warm and unwavering, intertwining with Ethan's. The heavy burden on his chest lifted, gradually and tenderly as his breath became lighter, his head tilting back against the couch in a moment of serene release. After years of solitude, the silence wrapped around me like a comforting embrace, no longer a companion of loneliness. The lights shimmered with a gentle warmth. Laughter danced through the air, Madison's grip steady in his while Max nestled comfortably against him. And for the first time in years, Ethan experienced a radiant and intense sensation blossoming within his chest, a feeling that resembled hope, that embodied the essence of home. If this tale captured your imagination, be sure to leave a like. It truly breathes life into the channel. Should you crave more tales that tug at the heartstrings and stir the soul, don't hesitate to press that subscribe button and activate notifications, ensuring you're always in the loop for every new chapter that unfolds. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I eagerly await your reactions. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and until we meet again in the next tale, farewell.